At first, it seemed like nothing more than a coincidence. It started about a month ago. I'm someone who usually sleeps pretty soundly, no issues, no tossing and turning. But then, one night, I woke up exactly at 3:17 a.m. I didn't think much of it. Maybe I'd woken up because of a strange dream, or maybe my body was just adjusting to a change in routine. The next night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. again. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, but then it started to happen every night. The first few nights were manageable. I would wake up, look at my phone, see the time, and then roll over to go back to sleep. But by the fourth night, it became impossible to ignore. I started setting my alarm for 3:16 a.m. just to see if it was some kind of pattern my body had developed. The alarm would go off, but I wouldn't wake up until exactly 3:17 a.m. The weirdest part? My phone's alarm wouldn't even wake me up, but I would be fully conscious at 3:17 every time. It wasn't just the time, though. I started noticing other small things. The air in my room seemed colder when I woke up. Not freezing, but definitely a noticeable chill that wasn't there during the day. My cat, usually curled up in bed with me, would be sitting by the door, staring out into the dark hallway at 3:17 a.m. It was almost like she was waiting for something, or someone. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But the more it happened, the more unnerving it became. I couldn't explain it. I figured maybe it was just stress or my body's strange way of adjusting to life. But then things started getting a little odd. One night, I decided to do something I've never done before. I set up a camera in my room. I wasn't expecting to catch anything, but at least it would give me some answers. Maybe I was sleepwalking or something. The next morning, I checked the footage. The camera was working fine until exactly 3:16 a.m. Then it just cut off. No flicker, no glitch, just off. I rewatched it a few times, wondering if maybe the camera had just malfunctioned, but no, it stopped right before 3:17 a.m. I didn't know what to think, but what freaked me out the most was that after I turned the camera off, I found something strange on my desk, a small scrap of paper. It was crumpled, as if it had been tossed there carelessly, but it wasn't something I'd written. I unfolded it slowly, almost afraid to see what it might say. It read, "You're awake now. We're waiting." I didn't know what to make of it. My first thought was to brush it off, but something about it felt wrong, too real, too personal. But the next night, I woke up again at 3:17 a.m. It's hard to explain the kind of dread that slowly builds up in your chest when something so simple, like the time, start to feel like it's out of your control. The next few nights after the paper appeared, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. I kept telling myself that I was just stressed, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but it was becoming harder and harder to deny that this was something more. It didn't help that I couldn't remember falling asleep anymore. The moment I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being pulled into a deep sleep. And the next thing I knew, I was awake again at 3:17 a.m. No fading in and out, no dream-like transitions, just suddenly wide awake and staring at the clock. I kept thinking back to that paper I found. "You're awake now. We're waiting." What did that mean? Who was waiting? And why was it always 3:17 a.m.? I even considered that I might be losing my mind. Maybe the pressure of my job, or just life in general, was catching up to me. Maybe I was slipping into some kind of mental state where my mind was messing with me. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I started to feel watched. Not just in the way you sometimes feel when you're being stared at, but the kind of feeling that creeps under your skin and doesn't let go. Something was in my room with me. Something waiting for me to wake up. It got worse. One night I woke up at 3:17 as usual, but this time it was different. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker. The shadows in my room seemed deeper. I sat up in bed, feeling the familiar rush of panic I'd come to dread each night. I couldn't hear anything at first, but then I noticed a faint sound, like soft footsteps in the hallway. My heart started racing. I had no roommates, no pets that could wander into the hallway at this hour. I got out of bed, my feet touching the coal-hardwood floor, and I walked slowly to the door. I opened it, and the hallway was completely empty. I stared into the darkness, straining my eyes, waiting for something to appear. Nothing. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I had to get a grip. I closed the door and went back to bed. But then, as I lay there in the silence, I heard it again. This time it was a little louder, closer. The footsteps were outside my room, walking slowly, as though someone or something was deliberately taking its time. I wanted to scream, but the air around me felt suffocating. Instead, I stayed still, barely breathing, hoping it would stop. It didn't. The footsteps came closer, and at that exact moment, I heard a knock. One soft, deliberate knock just outside my door. I don't know how long I stayed there, frozen under the covers, but eventually, the knocking stopped. The footsteps faded away into the silence of the night. I couldn't bring myself to check again. I told myself that it had to be my mind playing tricks on me. Or maybe the house was just settling, creaking like old buildings do. But I couldn't deny it. Something was happening. Something that couldn't be explained away. The next morning, I checked the time again. 3:17 a.m. The clock blinked, as if to remind me that it was never just a coincidence. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I was being hunted by something that only existed at 3:17, and I had no idea how to make it stop. By now, I knew this wasn't just a phase. Something was happening to me. Something unexplainable. Every night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I would wake up, and every night, the sensation of being watched grew stronger. The sense of something being just beyond my reach, lingering in the dark corners of my room, was becoming too much to ignore. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just stress. I wasn't sleeping well, and it was messing with my head. But it wasn't just waking up that was unsettling. It was everything around it. The room felt off, like the atmosphere had changed. The shadows were deeper, more solid, and the temperature in my room was noticeably colder. I started recording myself while I slept. The camera was set up by the bedside table, pointed directly at me, just in case I could catch some clue as to what was happening. The first couple of nights, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But as the days passed, things began to shift. One morning, I checked the footage from the previous night. The first few minutes were fine. I had fallen asleep around midnight like usual. But as the clock approached 3:17 a.m., something strange happened. The room appeared darker. The shadows in the corners of the frame shifted. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, I saw it. In the corner of the room, just behind the dresser, a dark shape began to form. It was a figure, indistinct at first. But as I stared at the screen, the shape became clearer. It looked almost human, but it wasn't. The figure seemed to shift, like it was in constant motion, stretching and curling in unnatural ways. And the most disturbing part? It wasn't moving toward me. It was looking at me. I felt my stomach tighten as I hit pause on the video. I sat there, staring at the frozen frame, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't look like a person. It didn't even look like anything human at all. It was wrong. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what had happened. It had been there every night, and I had been asleep, oblivious. I had to know more. I started keeping a journal, writing down every detail, every change in my environment, no matter how small. I marked the times, the temperature drops, the shadows that moved just out of sight. But as I wrote, I also began to notice something else. I wasn't just waking up at 3:17 a.m. There was something else, something subtle, but terrifying. My memories of the night would become hazy, almost like a fog had descended on my mind. It was as though I was forgetting the events that occurred after I woke up. I couldn't remember hearing the footsteps anymore, or the knocking on the door. It was like something was wiping my memory clean, leaving only the feeling of terror in its wake. The next night, I decided to stay awake. I set my alarm for 3:16 a.m., hoping I could catch whatever this thing was before it reached me. The night dragged on in silence, the stillness heavy in the air. The minutes seemed to stretch longer than usual, and by the time my alarm went off, I was already tense, my heart beating faster than usual. I kept my eyes fixed on the clock. 3:16, 3:17. The second the clock hit 3:17 a.m., I felt a rush of cold air. The room seemed to shift, the shadows deepening around me. I stared into the dark corners of my room, willing myself to stay calm. But something inside me was screaming, telling me to get out of there. And then I saw it, just like in the video. The shape started to form, but this time, it wasn't in the corner. It was right in front of me. I froze, unable to move or scream. The thing was so close now, its presence suffocating. Its features were still indistinct, like it was made of shadow itself. But I could feel its eyes on me, watching me, and I heard it, the low, rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You're not alone." I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with panic. I knew I had to do something, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. Suddenly, the figure took a step forward, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. My breath came out in visible puffs of air, and I could see my hands trembling, but I couldn't move. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost in my ear. "You're awake now. You know we're waiting." Before I could react, the shape seemed to dissolve into the air, leaving only the faintest trace of cold. And just like that, it was gone. I stumbled out of bed, my heart hammering in my chest. I ran to the door and flung it open, but the hallway was empty. Empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full. The next morning, I didn't feel the usual sense of relief that came with daylight. There was no comfort in the sun shining through my window, no calmness in the ordinary sounds of the world outside. Instead, I felt hollow, as if the night had taken something from me that I couldn't get back. It wasn't just the fear that lingered, it was something deeper, something that gnawed at my core. I tried to go about my day as usual. I went to work, forced myself to eat something, but it felt like I was walking through a fog, disconnected from everything around me. My mind kept drifting back to that moment, the figure standing in front of me, the voice that whispered in the shadows. "You're awake now. You know we're waiting." What did that mean? Why was I waking up at 3:17 a.m.? And why was it always me? As the day wore on, I started to feel the weight of what had happened. That thing, it was still out there, waiting for me to sleep. It knew I was awake. It knew I was aware. And I was terrified that it was getting closer. Every night, every minute. When I got home, I immediately checked the footage from the camera I had set up. I had to see if there was anything I had missed. I knew something had changed last night. The air had been thicker, colder. And the presence had felt more real, more alive. Maybe there was a clue I hadn't noticed before. I watched the footage, my stomach churning with dread. The video began like all the others. I fell asleep. Then, as the clock reached 3:17 a.m., something happened. The camera didn't cut off this time. No glitches, no interruptions. It was clear, but what I saw sent a chill through my bones. The figure was there again, standing in the corner. But this time, it wasn't just standing. It was moving slowly, like it was testing its own form, stretching and twisting in ways that didn't make sense. Its body seemed to flicker like a broken light. And every time it did, the room seemed to warp with it. The walls, the shadows, even the air, everything rippled around it. And then something new happened. As I watched, the figure slowly turned its head. At first, it was just a subtle shift, like it was adjusting its position. But then, the movement became deliberate. It looked right at the camera, at me. I felt my breath catch. I couldn't believe it. It saw me. It saw me. The camera shook slightly, as if the figure was somehow reaching into the very fabric of my reality. I wanted to look away, to turn the footage off, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, my eyes glued to the screen. And then the figure spoke. The voice, distorted and echoing like it was coming from every corner of the room, filled the space around me. "We're waiting for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. My heart raced, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. "We're waiting for you." I couldn't process it. The figure didn't move, didn't do anything else, but just stood there, staring at the camera. And then the screen went black. The footage cut off. I sat there, my hands shaking, the words echoing in my head. "We're waiting for you." What do they want? Who was we? And why was it me they were waiting for? I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening to me. This was no longer a coincidence or a figment of my imagination. This was real. Something was out there, watching me, waiting for me. And it wasn't going to stop until it had whatever it was after. I grabbed my phone and started searching for any information I could find. I had to understand what was happening. I didn't care if it sounded crazy. I needed to know. I stumbled across a forum thread buried deep in the internet. The title was simple: The 3:17 Phenomenon. Are you awake? I clicked on it, my pulse quickening. The thread was full of stories. Stories from people who had experienced the same thing I had. waking up at 3:17 a.m., night after night. The same figure, the same voice. Some described hearing whispers in the dark. Others felt the pressure of being watched. But there was one thing that all of them had in common. They were all being hunted by the same thing. I read through the thread, each story more chilling than the last. But one comment caught my eye. It was from someone who claimed to have figured out what was happening. The comment was short, and the words were simple. The figure isn't after you. It's after what's inside you. You're the key. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What did that mean? What was inside me? I stared at the comment for a long time, the unease growing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I truly understood. Why had I been chosen? What was the connection between the time, the figure, and me? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it wasn't going to let me go, not until it got what it wanted. And I had a terrible feeling that whatever was coming was far worse than I could imagine. I couldn't stop thinking about the comment. You're the key. What did it mean? The idea that I was somehow central to whatever was happening to me gnawed at my brain, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Every time I tried to push it away, it came back stronger. I had to find answers. I had no choice. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't going to stop. It was becoming more real, more persistent with each passing night. I couldn't keep living like this, in a constant state of terror, unable to sleep, unable to escape. I had to figure out what was happening and how to make it stop. The next night, I was determined to confront it. I stayed awake until 3:17 a.m., waiting for something, anything to happen. I sat on my bed, tense, eyes glued to the clock as the seconds ticked down. The minutes crawled by, each one heavier than the last. It felt like the air was pressing in on me, suffocating me. At 3:17 a.m., the room grew colder. I could feel it even before the shadows began to shift. It was as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath, waiting. And then it happened. I saw it. The figure was back. But this time, it wasn't just in the corner. It was standing right in front of me. Its form was still shifting, like it was made of smoke, its outline constantly in flux. But I could feel its presence more than I could see it. It was close, too close. I froze. I couldn't move. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath shallow. The thing was right there, staring at me with eyes that I couldn't see. But I could feel them, burning through me, seeing into my very soul. You've been waiting for me, I whispered, more to myself than to it. The words felt wrong, but they were the only thing that made sense. The figure didn't respond, but I could feel it listening, waiting for me to say more, to do more. And then for the first time, I noticed something that chilled me to my core. It wasn't alone. Behind the figure, I could see more shapes forming, just out of the corner of my eye. They were like shadows, like wisps of smoke, but there were more of them, many more, and they were closing in, surrounding me. I could hear them now, their whispers, a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, but none of them making any sense. It was as if they were speaking in a language I couldn't understand, or maybe didn't want to. And then I realized something even more horrifying. I wasn't just seeing them, I could feel them. Their presence was suffocating, pressing down on me from all sides. It felt like they were inside me, in my head, in my chest, in my soul. The pressure was unbearable, like I was being crushed under an invisible weight. But the figure in front of me wasn't moving. It just stood there waiting, watching. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, anything, to escape. But my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen in place, trapped by the overwhelming presence of whatever this thing was. Why me? I forced out, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? The figure finally moved, but not in the way I expected. It didn't step toward me, didn't reach out. Instead, it began to fade, slowly at first, like it was dissolving into the air, becoming one with the darkness. And as it faded, the whispers grew louder, the voices of the others increasing in volume and intensity. I could feel it now, the pain. It was like a physical ache deep inside me, gnawing at my insides. The thing wasn't just hunting me. It was trying to take something from me, something I didn't understand, but I could feel it slipping away. And then just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The figure was gone. The room was silent. the darkness still. The air was thick with the aftermath of whatever had just happened, and I was left standing there, gasping for air, trembling with fear. But something was different. I felt changed. The pressure, the whispers, they were gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left behind. Something inside me. Something I couldn't quite reach, but I knew was there. I stumbled to the door, my legs weak, my mind racing. I couldn't stay in that room anymore. It felt like it was cursed, like the shadows themselves had taken root inside it. I grabbed my phone and opened the forum thread again. I read through the comments, my eyes scanning for any clue, anything that could help me make sense of what had happened. But the thread had changed. All of the comments were gone, except for one. The one that had scared me in the first place. You're the key. You were always the key. Now it's time to unlock the door. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. The words felt like a warning, a promise. Something was still coming. Something that hadn't finished with me yet. I dropped my phone, and it hit the floor with a crack. I didn't need it anymore. I turned away from the door and glanced back one last time at the darkened room, where it all started. And that's when I saw it. In the reflection of the window just behind me, there was a shape, a figure, standing still, watching.